Two big questions on the table going into the Qatar weekend, penultimate round of the World Championship, were one, will McLaren be where they've been all year, which is really competitive, right at the front? Answer, yes. And will the Red Bull, that pesky Red Bull RB21, be having a good weekend or a difficult weekend for Max Verstappen? It's been up and down all year. Well, the answer is, at the moment, Friday and going into sprint qualifying, which we had on Friday evening in Qatar, the Red Bull does not look very good. Max complaining like crazy of the car bouncing more than any other driver that I heard on the radio. Couldn't see much in terms of external camera shots, but Max really annoyed with the amount of bouncing he had. He talked about it in the one and only free practice session. And then it became worse, it appears, during the qualifying session. So much so that when he got onto the soft tyres and did his first push run, it was going to be push too slow and then push 2 push laps on the soft tyres in Q3. On that lap, turn 4, Max just ran out of road and had to abort the lap. So that lap was gone. Then they went through the 2 slow lap process. So he just had 1 lap to do it, and he probably had floor damage as well, as a result of which Max qualified only 6th for the sprint. Beaten, would you believe, by Yuki Tsunoda, basically the same time as Max, but slightly quicker. And yes, he'll be able to take this back to Japan over the winter, that he out-qualified Max Verstappen for the sprint race. We'll see what happens on Saturday, of course. But once that bouncing had happened, there is absolutely nothing, of course, that you can do because the cars are in Parc Fermé. And Max was graphically describing the problem at the end of Q2 when they were still running the medium tyres, around the medium in SQ1, SQ2. And particularly at turn 7, where they were saying the car looks pretty much on the nose, pretty pointy. And Max saying, not much I can do because I've got understeer and I've got mid-corner dramas as well with the bouncing. And they said, well, it's over-rotating at the rear. They gave him a different torque setting, but that's what it was like. It was just like lots going on and no result, of course, at the end of all that. And all of that, I think, just a function of the amount of bouncing he's got, bouncing into most of the corners, makes it very difficult to judge and balance the car. All credit to Yuki Tsunoda. I presume his car's got a lot of bouncing as well, but he didn't make any mistakes this time, or really big mistakes anyway, and got the lap in, so good for him. He was quick actually from the start of free practice as well. But getting back to the front, Oscar Piastri had his moments too. Turn 4 on the soft tyres right at the end, the car jiggled, but he just held it and stayed with the lap and just got the pole. At that point, George Russell was quickest for Mercedes. In the live stream a couple of days ago, a viewer kindly asked me who I thought was going to win in Qatar, and I said, well, head says George Russell, only because it kind of feels like a George Russell moment, and it's a sort of circuit where George does really well. Lots of scrappy racing, lots of sort of runoff area from which you can sort of recover, and we know how aggressive he is anyway. A lot of people thought that the Mercedes wouldn't be very good there because there are so many medium high-speed corners, but of course I think the reality of this Qatar circuit, and I'd kind of forgotten how soulless it is and how similar all the corners are. I mean, it's just got no character at all as far as I can tell. And I think in the case of Lando Norris, it looked like he sort of, A, he wasn't too fired up about it. B, he's not that worried about whether Oscar now beats him, because all he's got to do is just score points and he's going to be world champion. Good for him. And C, it kind of looked as if he didn't know where he was on the lap anyway. Had a track limits drama, ran wide a couple of times. But Oscar sort of kept it on the straight and narrow and just got the pole. So it's good for him. There'll be a bit of a race. But, I say a bit of a race. I can't imagine Lando's going to take any sort of race to Oscar tomorrow, or George for that matter. He's going to cruise around and get points. George might well take the race to Oscar. And of course, come the Grand Prix, qualifying in the Grand Prix, that's when this limitation of 25 laps per set of Pirelli tyres will have effect. In terms of the sprint race, 19 laps, a little bit short of the limit. It'll be a very good tester. Interesting to see a few teams running the hard tyre for 25 laps in the free practice session this morning. The fuel runs again showed how good McLaren are. Ferrari also in trouble around Qatar. Too many difficult, long, medium, fast corners for that Ferrari chassis. Charles Leclerc looking as edgy. Well, Lando looked messy, Charles Leclerc looked edgy and had lots of edgy moments. Lewis Hamilton did not make it out of Q1, SQ1 yet again. And I think it's a function of Lewis's year now that it kind of passed without too much comment. Lewis, in his in the brief interview he did afterwards, very cynical in his replies, with a smile on his face, obviously as a result of the whole John Elkann thing about don't talk, the drivers are talking too much, just refusing to talk about anything to do with the car and referring the interviewee to the prospect of it being a nice circuit in terms of the weather, and that was about it. But the reality was it was another messy session for Lewis Hamilton. I was amazed in something like SQ1. I mean, in the race this could happen if you're talking about time management or maybe fuel or something like that. But I was amazed in SQ1 that going into his last lap when he was on the bubble, I mean, he wasn't even on the bubble, it was he needed to put in a quick time to get into the top 15 to get out of the last 5. His engineer said, Lewis, take turn 17 in 6th. And I had to look back at it, and he'd been taken in 7th. In classic Lewis Hamilton style, if you're on the edge, always go for the longer gear, have the car a bit calmer. And I think that looked good. I mean, that's what you'd expect of Lewis Hamilton. If it's a Charles Leclerc, edgy, high rev, energizing the car, 6th gear kink, you'd expect a Lewis Hamilton to get 7th just beforehand. That's how Lewis has always driven. And he said, no, Lewis, take it in 6th. And I was watching and looking at the speeds. I mean, he took it in 6th, and he was something like 8 kilometers an hour slower than Charles going through there on his so-called quickest lap. Well, it was his quickest lap, but it wasn't a quick lap. It wasn't quick enough to get him in. And I don't know what context that is absurd to me. In the context of the engineer telling the 7 times world champion what gear to use for a corner, or doing it anyway in SQ1, for what reason? I don't know. I mean, just complete and utter lack of communication, lack of understanding, lack of harmony, lack of feel. And again, to come back to all the comments I made about Lewis going to Ferrari, when trying to look on the bright side, I always said, but at least he's got Freddie Vasseur there, who knows him, he knows the way he drives, he knows what sort of gears he would like for any given corner, the way Lewis likes things to be slightly longer and calmer in terms of gear ratios. But Freddie Vasseur obviously isn't doing anything about that. And no wonder Lewis felt completely deflated afterwards. I'm not saying you can blame the engineer there for telling him to use a gear that Lewis didn't feel comfortable with or didn't result in a lap time that worked. That's not the point. The point is that they were even doing that in the first place. That is the point. And that is a sign of a much deeper problem. And it's just very sad to see Lewis Hamilton being shrugged off now as not making it out of Q1. I mean, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? In a Ferrari, absolutely ridiculous. Having said that, Charles Leclerc wasn't quick today. Lewis is 0.4 slower than Charles. I mean, one of the amazing things for me was Lance Stroll not getting out of Q1 because Fernando Alonso was really quick. Stroll was 0.6 slower than Fernando Alonso in Q1. And it wasn't a good day either for Racing Bulls. I thought they would be quick, but they weren't. I mean, you'd imagine this would be a really good circuit for Liam Lawson, because in the same way that Max cannot impart anything into a Red Bull, or very little into a Red Bull, that Yuki Tsunoda couldn't do, you would imagine that Liam Lawson would be right up there with Isaac Hadjar, but he wasn't, and he was half a second slower than Isaac in SQ1 as well. So just going through the grid for the sprint race, Oscar Piastri on the pole for McLaren, 20.0, very good lap. Lando Norris, P3, 20.2. So Oscar, I think that's more Lando just not getting in a clean lap. George Russell, 20.0 as well, beaten by 0.03 of a second. P2 for Mercedes, good result for him. Kimi Antonelli, P7 in the other Mercedes. Fernando Alonso, P4, really good in the week that it was announced. Shortly after we were saying in the live stream that really Adrian Newey should not be anything other than a team principal these days, and he's been a team principal really at Red Bull for quite a long time, and anybody that wants to outshout Adrian in any team these days is quickly going to get stamped underfoot. In the week that we had that, Fernando Alonso P4 for Aston Martin and Adrian on the pit wall. So good result for him. As I say, ridiculously poor result for Lance Stroll. Yuki Tsunoda P5 ahead of M. Verstappen. Wow. Yeah, okay. First time that's happened, but good on him. Kimi Antonelli 7th, as I say. Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon in the 2 Williams Mercedes made it through to the top 10. Carlos was 8th. Alex 10th, and they were sandwiching Charles Leclerc in the very unwieldy, edgy, difficult Ferrari. Others not to make it through the two Haas Ferraris. That was a bit of a surprise for me, but Oliver Behrman and Esteban Ocon did well to get out of Q1, comfortably out of Q1. And the two Sauber Ferraris did very well too, I thought, to get into Q2 comfortably. Gabriele Bortoleto and Nico Hülkenberg both having track limits and running wide dramas right on the edge, but nonetheless doing a good job to get out of Q1. Unlike, of course, as we say, Sir Lewis Hamilton. What a shame that was. Anyway, that's the sprint race, and we'll see tomorrow how it goes. I probably sound a bit flat. It's because the whole thing's a bit flat, isn't it? It's not going to be a championship finale that I think a lot of people were trying to tease it up to be. And it's on a pretty, as I say, the only word that comes to mind is soulless. Adjective that comes to mind is soulless circuit, with all these corners that are basically the same. I'm sure it's a great track for MotoGP. What are Formula One cars doing there? That's the question. But anyway, it will be a scrappy sprint race, probably between Oscar and George. Oscar, it'll be interesting from Oscar's point of view, because he does need to obviously get a result if he can, win the race and just try and do something with the points gap to Lando. So he'll want to make sure he doesn't hit anything and finishes above all. But equally, he'll want to win this race and beat George Russell. And George will be thinking, well, Oscar will be a bit conservative because of points, and I shouldn't have any trouble with Lando, and Max is way behind me. Here's a big chance to win. So that could be an interesting little cameo, I guess. And Fernando Alonso in there. He needs a good race, doesn't he? He's had a couple of good qualifying sessions. It'd be great to see Fernando have a good race tomorrow in the sprint, and I'm sure he will. And will Yuki Tsunoda beat Max Verstappen to the line at Red Bull? I mean, if anything, this performance today by Red Bull kind of sums up why Lando appears to be just walking very relaxed way, give or take a few track limits dramas and running wide here towards the World Championship. Because it's just been such an up and down year for Red Bull. I mean, 1 minute they're out there really quick, and the next minute they're struggling in Mexico, struggling throughout practice and qualifying in Brazil. Then they have a great race in Brazil, a pretty good race anyway, or very good race. And then they come here, and no reason really why the car should be bouncing and terrible. This is a Red Bull development that's, of a great car that we've had in this whole era of this formula. And it's terrible. It's all over the place. Max can barely drive the thing, as he said. So, I mean, that's no wonder. I mean, this is a little cameo of the year, actually, that is just passed behind us, I think, isn't it? Anyway, back tomorrow with a report on how that sprint race goes, and obviously how qualifying goes for the Grand Prix proper. So we'll see then. Big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, to Track Ninja, and to REC Watches for their support of this channel. And of course, to you, the viewer, for watching. See you tomorrow.